Well, the sheer number of catalytic converters being stolen off cars is exhausting. But now some owners of targeted cars in Ocala are getting good news. 3 people have been arrested. TV20's Ali Salachi tells us why one particular type of vehicle is being targeted by the thieves.
A battle that we're fighting, but just got to find out a way to win.
3 men were arrested on December 28th in connection to catalytic converter theft reported in Ocala. They were found in Flagler County with 13 stolen items. Victims like Chris Spears were notified yesterday about the arrest.
We were just moving inventory, and when you start a truck and there's no catalytic converter on it, it makes quite a ruckus. So we immediately figured out something was wrong. We looked, it was missing, so we called the Ocala Police Department.
Ocala detectives say this kind of theft has been increasing and confirm they received 25 reports since November.
In Flagler County's case, they made their arrests, they did their bulletin, sent it out, we reviewed it, and we were able to work off of that bulletin, so we'll always try to help each other.
Victims I spoke with say their pickup trucks like this one were targeted in their apartment complexes. The same situation happened at Prestige Auto Sales, and many say catalytic converters are not cheap to replace.
Well, we may have a dozen Toyota trucks. Only one Tacoma had it stolen from, and it was over $2,000 for the catalytic converter to be replaced.
Spears says his security cameras helped follow the vehicle responsible for the theft, and detectives quickly connected the dots.
There's cameras everywhere, so when we get information from other agencies, that gives us something to look for when we're reviewing our surveillance.
Detectives suggest keeping cars in a garage and parking cars in a well-lit place.
I've seen places that will weld metal plates where their converters are at to prevent thieves from getting under there.
Police are still trying to find more of the victims. In Ocala's Ali Salachi, TV20 News.
A U.S. senator filed a proposal today that would seek to curb thefts of catalytic converters. The bill would require people to keep detailed records about purchases of catalytic converters that have been removed from vehicles.